Fire up the Tiki torches and pass the Doritos. The 45th edition of Survivor is coming at you. Think you're ready to outwit, outplay, and outlast today's guest? I'm Bill Brio, and welcome to Brio TV, the podcast. My guest today is an associate producer slash writer slash journalist who is also, and this is indisputable, the world's foremost authority on reality TV programming. I'm talking, of course, about Toronto's own, my good buddy, Murtz Jaffer. Murtz, great to see you today.
Great to see you. Now, here's the thing, Bill, right off the top, they told me to make sure you introduce me, in addition to all my titles, of which there's a plethora,
right?
Associate producer at the morning show. It's very important you say that. That's how I got the permission to do this.
All right, let's absolutely give that show a plug. That's the morning show. Murtz is the associate producer. This is Canada's top-rated morning show. And the wonderful...
Now we're good. Now we've fulfilled it, all right? We're good to go now, Bill.
We're good to go. Listen, I love the morning show. All those guys are terrific. But we're talking here mainly, we want you on to talk about the 45th edition of Survivor. Can you believe it, Murtz? 45 editions of this show.
Here's the thing, Bill. I think when it comes to covering television, you definitely have me beat. You're especially rocking your Letterman beard right now. I don't know if this is some ode to Letterman or something. I've been wondering it for a long time.
Right.
You have me beat on many things in terms of duration, in terms of how long you've been in the Television Critics Association. But one of my sort of gold shining stars where I can finally say I'm better at Bill on one thing over all others when it comes to TV is Survivor. You were a curmudgeon about this in 2000, yes, which is hard to believe was, 23 years ago. And I told you at that time, and it's the same thing that I'm echoing now, that this show is going to change television. This show is going to basically revolutionize the way we see TV. And currently, not only was I right about that, but it also currently is saving television with this writer's strike, So, I can't say I don't like to toot my own horn because I don't think there's anyone in the world that loves doing that more than I do. But certainly I saw this coming.
Well, you did. And you're absolutely right. All of that is true. I thought it was going to be like disco. I thought it was going to last maybe 2.5 years. And I was a curmudgeon. And this is how we met. I was typing up stories at the Toronto Sun, and you kept phoning in, filing off letters to my editors saying, fire this
because
guy.
You were hating on it. You weren't writing stories about it. You were just, you were basically just it's funny because I guess at the time I didn't like your sort of anti-reality television character, when really now I just feel like I've morphed or merged into my own character, which is a proponent for these shows. So I'm almost like, if you were the anti-hero, I feel like I was the hero, So maybe I shouldn't have been as judgmental. I didn't realize at the time that it was part of your shtick,
Well, listen, now you are the expert on characters and the difference between personalities and players. And we'll get into that a bit later. You've got a great symposium coming up on that. But I'm just curious. So first, I want to get your impression on this 45th edition. It's going to be on CBSN Global, of course, where it has dominated for 2 decades. And we know that it's going to be 90 minutes. It's going to be an expanded version, the 45th. And I think there's 17 contestants and 1 returning player. But fill us in, Murtz. What do you know? You're the insider. What else is happening on this new version of Survivor?
Well, I think it's interesting because currently Big Brother US is on. It's a pretty, sort of landmark season for that. And they actually, on the US Big Brother currently, they actually have one of the most heralded Survivor players of all time in Suri. Suri often regarded as the best player never to win. The reason that I bring that up is because one of the sort of subsequent storylines of Big Brother US, which is on right now, is that they finally went back to a tried and true form of casting, which is going with a slightly older cast, and I have always advocated for that. people don't realize this, especially new age Survivor fans that weren't even alive when the first one was on. The reason that Survivor did so well back in 2000 is because it had an older cast. Like we had Richard Hatch, we had the late Rudy Bosch, we had like Sue Hawk. It was an older cast, people that had like really lived lives. And you can sort of see that playing out currently on Big Brother, where there was an alliance called the Professors that basically realized that, for once, the older people are outnumbering the young, which is very rare as reality TV has progressed. So one of the things that sort of stood out to me about Survivor 45 is, it's a younger cast. So, like that's the one thing that sort of like stood out to me. The second thing is they do have the returning member that you referenced is Bruce, and he was the one that sort of he's an insurance adjuster. And he actually had to leave the first episode last season, and Jeff gave him the unprecedented chance to come back and play, It's going to be very interesting to see how this happens now. We'll all remember Mike Skupin when he burned his hands off in season 2, and he eventually got a chance as well to come back. But, if I even have like, a hangnail, or if I even get a scratch on my like forearm now, I'm going to be like, sorry, we got to come back. Like, if I don't like my odds, like if I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of like anti-Murtz people here. Oh, Jeff, look, I've got a little scratch here on my hand. Sorry, you're going to have to let me come back. Oh, what? That's not enough for me to come back? What about Bruce, circa Roe versus Wade? I'm saying it's just as this like precedent now,
Well, speaking of that, Murtz, listen, from what I understand, there are 3 lawyers on this new edition, the 45th. Isn't this jump the shark moment for Survivor? Do we need to see more lawyers? Like, I know people watch to see people drop their briefs on this show, but this just seems to be going too far with 3 lawyers.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say the sort of Voldemort name, like Stacey Stillman, and we all remember that. Like, I actually thought that they would actually not do a lot of like lawyers after that incident. But here's the thing. This is a show that has been geared towards lawyers. Some of the best players, I think one of my favorite players is Eliza Orleans, who's now a public defender. She actually ran, I think, to become the district attorney for Manhattan, and she was in Vanuatu. She's played a few times. But generally speaking, lawyers, sort of have an advantage, like they basically, I'm trying to think of how to say this politically correct, but they basically have to sell you something you don't want to buy. And on a show like this, that is a very attractive trait. So no, I'm not surprised that there's that number of lawyers, but there's one contestant here that, you brought me on this show. There's one contestant that I want to focus on in this interview, the one to look out for.
Okay.
The shining star. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a guy by the name of Brandon Donlin. Now, let me tell you about Brandon Donlin. Okay. When I started this whole sort of like expedition of mine into the forums of reality television, there were charity events, there were reality finale parties that I would go to. I went all over the continental U.S. attending these things to meet these players. And I guess I wasn't alone, because Brandon Donlin did the same thing that I did. Brandon Donlin has been to, I'm not going to say as many reality events that I have, but he has certainly been to many. Our paths have crossed at quite a few of them where he attended just as a fan. And so the talk of the Survivor community is that one of our own has been cast on this show. Brandon is like a super fan. Brandon actually played in a game that became famous on the internet during the pandemic that, it doesn't really exist anymore, but it was called Sequester. And it was basically an online reality show. Like when we couldn't go out, a former Big Brother player put this show together, and you would get to like basically vote strangers off, the only difference being that it would be on webcam, maybe it's something that I hope I could do to you right now, but you could basically vote somebody off, and these games were very intense. They were very, I guess, sped up, like an entire sort of season would play out over the course of like one evening. And Brandon played a lot of these games. Brandon, he has the pedigree of being a fan. He played in these online games. He's heavily featured in that first promo for the new season. So I would definitely keep an eye out on this guy. The similar situation. Yeah.
Murtz, isn't the pressure going to be incredible on this guy? Because everybody like you, everybody who really knows this show,
universal,
is going to be
not
saying,
just me, former players, everyone.
Right. They're all going to say, okay, buddy, show us. You're Mr. Know-it-all. Let's see what you got here, Brandon. Isn't that going to be a lot of pressure?
Well, it's funny because I thought the same thing when the last Big Brother Canada came out, and the same situation happened. There was a player named Daniel Clark on the last Big Brother Canada, literally cut from the same cloth as Brandon. I don't know if these casting people have found out about this online sequester show, and they're just now pulling people from this show. It certainly is starting to seem that way to me. Like BB Can did it with Daniel Clark, who was on sequester. Survivor doing it now with Brandon Donlan. Now, here's the thing. If you had interviewed me before the last Big Brother Canada, you could have just swapped out Brandon's name and put in Daniel Clark. And I was saying the same thing. Look out for this guy. Played in this online show. And you know what happened, Bill? He went all the way to the final three. And I looked like a genius once again. And so, I just think that, if we base this on the Daniel Clark example, Brandon did this game for the long haul. I'm not going to tell you that this guy's going to win. I'm just going to tell you that, the action is going to revolve around this guy. This guy knows the genre, knows it probably better than I do, well, no.
Whoa.
Strike that misquote, that's the pressure of life. Yeah. But he has a very similar path to mine. He's younger than I am, so he hasn't been doing it as long. He hasn't been going to the events as long. But I would keep an eye out for this guy. I think other people are in serious trouble. I think they are in serious trouble.
Murtz, tell me about, there's a Canadian in this edition, a fellow by the name of Keleb Gebrewold, I believe, from Vancouver. Do you know anything about him?
To be honest with you, I've never been one to sort of advocate for someone that I'm not aware of, and so I think that I had a better sense of Kane, the player from Saskatchewan last season, once again, another lawyer. This player I don't know too much about, this one from Vancouver, if I'm being straight with you, Bill, this is Brandon's season and Brandon's alone. I think that the storylines that are going to come out of this season are going to be Bruce's return and sort of the precedent that it sets. And what this means when you cast a superfan, is this guy going to be good TV? Is this guy that's been, studying the show? Is he going to be as good as people think he is? And I think really it comes out of that. There's, I did sort of see Keleb, I think I was at an event where Keleb was at in the past. Mm-hmm. And so, from what I remember from that event, and, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not even sure it was him. At the time, you meet so many of these people, and so many people that are in this reality community go to all the same events. And so it's inevitable that people that sort of attend these events as fans eventually get on the show. And so I'm not sure if this was Keleb that I saw at this random party about a year and a half ago, but I could tell you that I do think it was, and he was very social at the time. He was talking to a lot of people, and so that's pretty much all I could say.
He's just a young guy, I think, 27 or so. And I just like that the Canadian has the word brew right in his name. I think that's...
yeah, I guess. If we're basing this on how well do Canadians do on these shows, which is a subject that I've studied in great detail. Okay. I've written about it quite a bit. There is something to be said. Now, from my work on this subject, if we're going off of Survivor, people like to say that Erica and Marianne were the first two Canadians, and then they won back-to-back seasons. I don't know. I'm an old school kind of guy. I still remember, and I'm sure you do too, it's when we wrote about it, Kel Gleeson from Survivor Australia, the beef jerky guy. And I remember that he was dual or something, wasn't he? That was a big story at the time, right?
It was. He was in the U.S. Army, I think, when he was playing, right? Yeah.
And I just feel like this guy has become such an afterthought because he went pre-jury or whatever. People like to forget, I almost feel like that's sort of how they think of Murtz at the Toronto Sun. Oh, just yeah, maybe he was here, and so I want Kel Gleeson to get the props that he deserves. He did play before, there is a precedent for this. I think that Marianne and Erica have set the bar so high that when Kane was coming back to play, last season. I can't imagine the pressure. I can't even comprehend the pressure on that guy. Like, you're coming off of like 2 back-to-back winners. Everybody thinks that Canadians cannot be stopped on the show, and he did okay. Like, I think he made it to the jury, I believe. And so for Keleb, he's faced the same kind of pressure. Like, I'm sorry, but anything less than a post-merge finish is not acceptable in this country.
Well, we'll find out if Kane is able. Now,
Keleb. Well, Kane was last season, but yes.
Now, you mentioned the diversity in terms of age in the cast, which I think is really important, Murtz. I think you're onto something there. We need everybody, all the entire audience need people to root for, to be involved with. And if everybody's sort of 29 and in beachwear, it just becomes Big Brother in a way to me. It's not as interesting. But also, and I believe this is mandated now, CBS, in terms of diversity in casting, it crosses all lines, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. And actually, the people that I know, we're going to talk about that event that is happening here soon, but two of the people that I run, that panel with, former winner Wendell Holland from Survivor Ghost Island and Bryce Isaiah, who was on Survivor Cagayan, were instrumental members of that, the Survivor Diversity Initiative. So yes, there was a real sort of like call out a couple of seasons ago, not just on Survivor, but for all reality shows. And it's funny, like I've been watching it for so long. But it's only, and I think this is the problem with society in general, that like, it's only when somebody calls it out that we're like, oh my gosh, like, how did we not realize this earlier? Like, you're so involved in the gameplay that you don't realize that, like, why are the minorities always going so early? Like, why had it been, so long since we had, like when Marianne won, I think the last female African-American contestant to win was Vecepia Towery. And she won season 4, the origins of Boston Rob. Like, it's incredible that it took like 20 years for that to happen again, So clearly there was something wrong in the wheel, something that needed to be addressed. And I think that, I don't know if it's like subtle prejudice or whatever, but the thing is, like, if there's only one person of a certain race on the show, or one or two, like, whether it's inherent or whether it's not, they're going to be isolated. And I'm just glad that, this has been recognized now for whatever reason, that we have things like the Cookout, a group of people that realize this and finally had the chance that, instead of there being a dominant, like, Caucasian alliance, once we're going to have a dominant African-American. And I just think that that was needed for the genre. I think that it's really, like, developed these shows past what they were. And if, reality television has built itself on being a microcosm of society. I've done thousands of interviews where I go back to the merch, like, why are these shows still on? Like, how has this been on for 23 seasons, whatever? It's because it is an escalated depiction of what society is. And if that's what the tagline that we associate with reality television, then it's got to represent what society actually looks like. And for a long time, it did not. And I feel like now it's finally catching up.
Yeah, when you look at society today in North America, it is divided. And, I think that Survivor at its best is a microcosm of our culture and society, and that makes it even more interesting.
It's when two people that would have never crossed paths in any other avenue of their life, but for some reason they were both on this show. That is the beauty of television. Survivor is at its best, and I think people have a misconception of this show. They think that a great season is when there's a lot of betrayal, or like when somebody shocks, and votes out their best friend. No, you talk to any true fan of this genre, it has nothing to do with the winner. It has nothing to do with the votes. It's when you get those moments. It's when, I just remember the conversations that, like, Rudy and Richard had, 23 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's what made me love this show. Seeing these two guys, this like openly homosexual guy talking to this like 72-year-old Navy SEAL who was prejudiced. But then as the season went on, as the 39 days went on, they realized that while they may have never talked in any other aspect of their life, in this scenario, they were the only two that they could trust. And that, to me, is what we have always been missing. We've never had that beauty again. And I think all of reality television is trying to get that sort of relationship once again. And if they can get another Richard and Rudy, they have a magic show. And that's, it's funny. That's what they had on The Circle season 1. The Circle season 1 on Netflix was the first time where I saw a very complete cast, a cast that was magic, a cast that just sparked, where you didn't even have a single weak link on that cast. And I really think that show did something, and it says something, because that's why The Circle is still on. They finally found that secret sauce of getting a perfect cast, and the results were amazing.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to work at 90 minutes? Is that, I wonder, as you talk about these moments, they're going to have 3 or 4 of them an episode, maybe, that's a long span. Or do you think it'll work?
I think that this has been needed for so long. I think it's a gift that, the SGA and the writer's strike has given us, is these longer episodes, because one of the biggest criticisms in the new era of Survivor has been that we don't know these people, and I think that if you ask me, Murtz, what is the best reality show on television right now, I don't even have to take a second to think about it. I think that the best reality show has been for many years Survivor, but not the American version, the Australian version. The Australians have just mastered how to put a reality show together.
Wow.
They have longer episodes. It airs 3 times a week. It's much more of a commitment to watch it. But because they have that much time to work with, they fully are able to develop every single contestant on that show. And as a result, the viewer is drawn in, because when you have the time to develop for that many episodes over the course of a week, longer episodes, you get to know each person. You get to know why they're playing. You get to know their backstory. And now the US show, you've noticed it last season and the season before, they have been pulling from what the Australian one is doing. Have you noticed, Bill, that now they do these sort of flashbacks where they show the contestants back at home or whatever, why they need the money or why they went to school, or how important that's all drawn from Australia. And I think that the 90 minutes is going to be great, not just to explain these stupid twists that I can't stand and that need, I remember it was like watching Lost last season, where I needed a clipboard to remember who has this idol and who has this and this face, which I don't like. I'll talk about that later, but I really can't stand it. And I hope that the extra time in these episodes, these extra 90 minutes, are not used to explain, how Jeff thinks this show should go. I hope that they're used to give us Richard and Rudy-like moments that are going to make us fall in love with these characters and relate to these characters and make this can't miss television, which it is and always has been.
It's basic storytelling. When you watch the Olympics, and the coverage in Canada and the US, the ones that are the most memorable is doing what you just said. They set up this person's from Kamloops and they're into surfboarding or whatever the heck it is, and you give you that backstory before the event, and it's exactly what you're saying is missing and should be added to Survivor and was last season.
Yeah, and I think that one of the moments I remember, we have the advantage now of TikTok where it snips these moments, but I remember I kept seeing this clip of and I'm sure you've seen it, of those 2 marathon runners who basically finished at the same time or whatever, and they were given the choice of whether they want to share the medal, share the gold, and they look at each other, and at the same time they basically say, no, share, we're going to share, and it's that kind of stuff that I feel, I do think one of the shows that I think is really good at that is The Amazing Race, both the US version and the Canadian version. They are much better, and they have because it's a pure show, because there's no voting and no backstabbing. It's just a question of who can finish the task and cross the finish line first. Because there's not a lot of deception involved, they have a bigger opportunity to get those moments. I think that the perfect reality show is a melding of both. The perfect reality show is one where you get those moments, but you also get the backstabbing, where you also get the selfishness of an individual game. And I think that that's also the reason why the hottest show right now is The Challenge, why there's 1,000 different versions of The Challenge, that's bringing people from all of these shows, bringing the MTV people, from back in the early 2000s, now putting in Survivor people, Big Brother people, international versions of the show. There's more spin-offs of The Challenge than I think I can ever remember of any other show. And the reason for that is TJ Lavin and MTV have finally sort of discovered this. They have this like potion now where you get the old school fans that remember people like Johnny Bananas and Mark Long and like all these guys from back in the day. Then you've got the new age fans because they're the ones that are watching for all the new Survivor contestants like Chanel, who's on there now, or Michaela that's on there now, and they remember them. And you get this audience of both the old school that are rooting for the MTV people, the new school that are rooting for like Cassidy from The Last Survivor, or like Sebastian from Survivor Ghost Island. And so they're really onto something right now. And I feel like the popularity of the challenge is going to take reality television into the new millennium.
I'm going to challenge you on the challenge a bit. I know I understand what you're saying internationally in terms of the scope worldwide. It's an enormous show, but it doesn't seem to be the big show in North America that these other shows are, Survivor and Big Brother and Amazing Race.
The problem, I mean, there's so much we could talk about on this topic. Like, it's interesting to me that in Canada, the challenge is airing on CTV. Traditionally, CTV has not picked up these shows. It has all these contestants from Big Brother and from Survivor and stuff, which are all like global shows, so it's very interesting to me just to watch it on CTV, like that show. I thought it was always going to be a fit for global, considering how many of like their talent is cast. As far as like why you don't think it has sort of hit, you got to understand that, all these other shows, Survivor, Big Brother, The Amazing Race, if we take it back to The Apprentice, they were all origin stories. They were all like original format shows that like were developed by somebody. You could argue that they all, they did like US versions of ones that like originated in Britain or whatever. I'm not going to get into that history, but my point here is that they all started at ground zero, season one. The challenge is a different beast. The challenge originated sort of on MTV, out of Road Rules and The Real World. And now, because it's become so popular on that cable network, they're sort of trying to take it to the mainstream broadcast channel. And so that is hard because you're basically asking people to watch a show where you have Johnny Bananas, who's so well known in the MTV circle. Mm-hmm. But now that you're moving him to like CBS and CTV, there's people that might not have watched that on cable. They don't know the history. So
these guys fall through the platform cracks, don't they, Murtz?
Well, you're going from it's two different demographics. You're going from like people that grew up with Johnny Bananas on MTV and now asking people to tune into broadcast to watch him and familiarize themselves. There's no way that audience, like some of the audience that just like watches CBS and CTV on a daily basis, there's no way they tuned into like, CT carrying him around like a backpack from like 15 years ago, like they're not going to know that reference. But eventually we're going to reach a point where, because the challenge recycles its players so much, that a new history is going to develop. You're not going to need to know the history from 15 years ago. You're going to remember the history that started in 2022 and 2023. And then you're going to have the same sort of like love for it as those old school people do. I know I'm really getting into the weeds here, but, there's a lot to sort of say about that topic.
Hold on to your immunity idols. We'll be back with more from Murtz in just a moment. What's happening this month on North America's fastest rising streaming service, Paramount Plus? Well, set phasers for stun as Paramount Plus heads boldly into a fourth season of Star Trek Lower Decks. New animated episodes are airing every Thursday. Launching September 8th, there's also a global event, a Star Trek Day special. Jerry O'Connell, the voice of Lower Decks Commander Jack Ransom, celebrates 50 years of Star Trek animation. Remember that Saturday morning cartoon series from the 70s featuring William Shatner and the original cast all reassembled and reanimated? As Spock would say, fascinating. And check out the Canadian-made movie, The End of Sex, a Paramount Plus exclusive starring Emily Hampshire and Jonas Chernick as a married couple who try to rekindle their relationship. As Picard would say, engage. And remember, with a mountain of entertainment to choose from, there is something for everyone on Paramount Plus. Well, we're here again talking with Emily Gagne from Hollywood Suite. Emily, it's September. This is the time of year, all the sports, there's hockey starting, baseball's on, football, and I understand Hollywood Suite is weighing in.
Oh yeah, we're kicking off the school season with sports on film. You know, movies like Slapshot, which is a new personal favorite. I know that sounds insane, but I just watched it for the first time. It still holds up. It's great. Field of Dreams, everyone's favorite. We've got the original Space Jam. Oh, and we have the premiere of 42 with the late, great Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, no kidding. You know what? Don't tell anyone. I have never seen Slapshot.
What, Bill? That seems like your favorite movie.
I know. So now I have a chance to get caught up thanks to Hollywood Suite. So thank you for programming it. What else you got coming up in September?
We also have what we call September soundtracks. So if you're not into sports, we've got some great musicals and music movies. You know, everything from Purple Rain to Scott Pilgrim versus the World is on our service this month. And the last thing I wanted to mention, which is in neither collections, but it's a big deal to me, and it might be to you, listeners. We have Ishtar coming to the service. One of the worst movies ever, some say, and one of the best movies ever, others say, including my mom. So Ishtar is coming to Hollywood Suite September 9th. Tune in. Elaine May's famously disastrous comedy.
Well, there you have it. Emily's mom's favorite film, Ishtar, this month on Hollywood Suite. Thanks a lot, Emily.
Thanks, Bill.
Here he is again, Murtz Jaffer. If you were on Survivor, and I have no doubt you would do very well, but what would be the one thing you would never do? What's the rookie mistake that you know, I'm not going there?
Voting out the oldest player, without question. Voting out the oldest player. My number one move, if I ever got on that show, and I could cite, this is a subject, like I said, that I've studied for so long. The oldest person is not a weak link. The oldest person is your most trusted ally. And there's too many examples to name. It started off with Rudy. You know, you could go back to at the time, Keith was a little bit older in Survivor the Australian Outback. Now let's move on to Survivor Africa. Who made it to the final two? Kim Johnson, again, didn't turn. You know, Marquesas. You know, how far did Papi Pascal get? You know, Survivor 5, Thailand. That was the one where the players for the first time got to sort of pick their own tribes. And you had one tribe that had all the young people, Sukjai. You know, and you were thinking that, oh my God, look at this other tribe, like Chuigon, you know, all the older people. That season I love. It had Brian Heidick, the used car / softcore porn guy. It had Helen Glover, you know, the military person. It had Jan, who was a million years old. It had Clay, the late Clay. And you were just these guys are just getting waylaid in these physical challenges. And it was the exact opposite. The experience, they just ran the table with the other tribe. And so you'll notice from just even these early examples that I cite that the oldest player almost always goes to the end because they are reliable, you know, in a game that's built on trust, where the most valuable commodity is trust, not physical strength, not personality, trust. There's no one I would trust more than the oldest player. And that, it just shocks me every time I watch these shows, you know, that are all in a million seasons. They're almost all now in at least season 30, that they go for the oldest person first. If you do that, you don't deserve to be on this show because you clearly don't know the genre.
Do you think it's harder now to win Survivor than it was 20 years ago?
Yes.
Or and why is that?
It's because there's just too many inane twists. You know, the twists are killing this. I don't take any enjoyment of that. You know, that whole thing about we're going to put this clue in this bird cage or whatever, and you're going to have to wake up at night to get this clue to find this. It's too much. Okay. They're taking away from the purity of the game. You know, I've used this example so many times. In fact, whenever I do an interview, I somehow find a way to bring it up, but it really speaks to me is, let's say we play Monopoly. You know, it's a game that I love. You know, I went to the national championships. It's my favorite game, I think. And if I'm just destroying you, like I just know so many tricks. I know like which color properties to buy. I know little hidden ways to just beat like I don't just beat people in Monopoly. Like I humiliate them. Like I turn them off like board games forever. Now, if I'm killing you in this board game, okay, if I own everything, I've got Park Place and Boardwalk, I've got everything I want. And all of a sudden I land on chance and it says, oh, well, sorry, it's time for you to transfer your assets to the other player in the game. All that work that I've done, all of that just dominating strategy that I've employed just with one chance card goes out the window. That's how I've likened Survivor to be lately, and they don't even hide this fact. Like they do this thing now where like there's this hourglass thing where like the player that gets that, they just break this hourglass and they can just reset the entire challenge, and so what was the point then? What was the point of the first half of the game if you can just reset the game, And so that's why I think it's harder. I think that I just want them to go back to the basics. The argument against that is that, the basics are boring now, that we don't want to sort of just see one tribe. I remember Stephanie LaGrossa in like that Oolong season where one tribe was just humiliating the other tribe. Like they couldn't win anything. And then it's just a steamroll after the merge because they have such a numerical advantage. I'm sorry, that's what I want to watch. That if this is a show about the real world, there are haves and there are have-nots, okay? And that's just the way the world works. We cannot even the odds for the have-nots. I'm sorry, that's not real life.
And it's not even in sports. There are dynasties, there are dominant teams, and what are you going to do? Do you think Richard Hatch could win Survivor today?
I think Richard Hatch is one of the most brilliant minds that the game has ever seen. I think if you meet Richard Hatch, which I've had the pleasure of meeting many, many times, we were actually in a documentary together, and he just looks, the people that excel on these shows, there is something about them, the Boston Robs, the Richard Hatches, like you could cast the Dr. Will Kirby's, the Dan Gieslings, you could put them on any show and they will just destroy people, because they just look at the world and they just look at the world differently than most people do. And they just have a different way of speaking. And Richard Hatch has that. Like Richard Hatch, everything you know about him, that he's a former winner. You know that he had like problems with tax evasion and stuff like that. And yet you can't help but be drawn in by his charisma. And I remember when they did the first All-Stars, he was not the first to go, and which is incredible to me.
Right.
That to me speaks volumes about like how good that guy is at the game. For you to go there and not vote out the first winner, like, and it's the same, again, let's talk about Sandra Diaz-Twine, who I still feel like doesn't get enough credit. She won 2 games. Like who does that? Like she won and she still
did it again.
Like,
yeah.
Like it's, like
it's incredible.
So speaks to my point that there are some people that are just cut from the cloth of winning.
What about Boston Rob? Would you still consider him among the top players ever?
I think Boston Rob is a god. I think Boston Rob is a deity that like other players don't even deserve to be in the same game with. I think that he is just on a different level from everyone else. I've covered reality television, and I always get so much criticism for this. Oh, Murtz, how can people take you seriously as a journalist? Like you are such a stan for this Boston Rob guy. Like you've been just his biggest, And I go, yeah, well, I'm sorry, but like if I'm to be considered, which I am, the expert in this field, then you have to take my opinion seriously. And my opinion is that he is the greatest of all time, that the stuff that this man has done, the way that he looks at the world, the way that he is just on every show. That's what people don't understand is he, the big thing about Boston Rob is that he didn't make the jury the first time he played on Marquesas. Oh, how good can he be? If the first time he got to play, he wasn't good. And I liken that example to, what about players that sort of excel, like on the basketball court, like after 2 or 3 seasons? How many examples can we talk about that like didn't do great in their first season and ended up becoming Hall of Famers? This guy went on Survivor, didn't do well, came back, finished second. His wife ended up winning. He goes on The Amazing Race because of a technicality, does not win. Goes back again for Redemption Island and just delays everyone. And you could argue that, okay, well, how is that possible? A returning player versus like new people. That's like having Michael Jordan come back and take on a team of like, people straight out of college. You can't judge him on the same scale because he's had that much experience, right? Which I'm sure is what you're going to say.
No, it's just, who's the greatest hockey player in the NHL the last 5 years?
Austin or Connor?
McDavid.
Yeah.
And how many Stanley Cups has he won?
0.
Right. So, but, he will. Right, I think. Hopefully,
no, it's the same. Well, it's the same. I said it's that question that you asked the best player is it's usually a toss up between Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid, neither of which have won. And so, yeah, I mean, but if you talk to one of these Survivor fans, they'll be like, okay, well, why don't you put, Connor made, the example or the parallel to Boston Rob would be you take Connor McDavid and you put him against a team that has people that are only like 10, a team of like little leaguers. Okay. And that's how they argue out of like Boston Rob's win on Redemption Island, that you have a guy who played 4 times against first time players. What do you think is going to happen? And that is nothing in life bothers me more than that argument. Okay. Because it is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. If you're going to make that comparison, in fact, Rob has a harder time. There's like 15 people there that know who he is, that know that he got to the end so many times, and they don't vote. Now, you're telling me that he doesn't deserve to be respected for that? Then I'm sorry. Get away from me. Like, you don't even deserve a moment of my conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was a brilliant win. He had the biggest target of all time on his back, and he somehow won. That was staggering.
And people are like, like it's because he had experience. No, he had 15 people there. He was by himself, and he still managed to do it.
Yeah, and amazing. Talk to me about this symposium now. It's coming up September 26th, McMaster and Hamilton.
Actually, no. That's actually the question that I'm getting the most. McMaster has opened a Toronto campus. It's at 180 Bloor Street West. It's brand new. I don't even think the building has been used for anything yet. I think we're going to be the first one. So the first thing I want to say is it's in Toronto. It is not in Hamilton. You don't have to make that trek. And it's basically I've always wanted to sort of like bring an educational component to reality television. Even when things got started in 2000, I kept saying that, like, people refer to this as like a dumb man's entertainment or like escapist TV for the idiot, and I've always thought that there was more to it. I've always thought that there was, and I think that we've sort of elaborated on some of those points here today. And in that respect, we started doing these panels. I partnered with Wendell Holland from Survivor Ghost Island, brilliant guy. He's going to be on another reality show soon as well. And I partnered with Bryce from Survivor Cagayan. And we just thought, we could be doing more with this. Like it's not just about attending these like parties, that we do basically every month. We could be extending the conversation. And when we started talking, they basically said to me, or we talked together and we were like, okay, what are some of the things that people talk about when they bring up reality television? Some of the stuff you brought up, like the thing about like racism and like casting. So our first panel we did for last season's Survivor premiere, we did it in Toronto, and it was on race and reality TV.
Yeah.
We brought out a couple of reality stars. We had members from the Cookout, that groundbreaking alliance on Big Brother that just talked about the same thing we talked about a little bit today. Then we went to New York and we did another one over there, and it was on mental health. Like, who's looking out for these contestants after they leave the show? What kind of duty is there on producers, to sort of take care of these people? Like, are they just one and done? It's not the same. We can get into that with the union discussion too, but like, who's looking after these people?
And in fact, Murtz, there has been some tragedies over the years with other reality shows in terms of mental health, right? There's been actual lives lost, I think.
100%. Yeah. And like, it's primarily like that's happened in the international space, but it could certainly happen like on the North American shows as well. Yeah, for sure. There's been that. And anyway, it was a subject that we delved into with people in New York. Mm-hmm. We're going to be doing our next one in Toronto, like you said, on September 26th. In this one, I'm very excited because I think we have 5 winners, I believe, that are going to be participating in the discussion. We have Jam Jam, who is the winner of last season of Survivor. We have Marianne Oketch, who was the winner from Ajax, is going to be part of the panel. We have Ty McDonald, who was the last winner of Big Brother Canada. We have Kevin Jacobs, regarded as the best Canadian to ever play, another winner from Big Brother 10. We have Wendell, another winner from, like, there's going to be like $6 million on that panel in Murtz, you know? That's what we should call it, 6 million in Murtz. But anyway, and then we've also got Bryce Isaiah, and we're all going to be talking about this concept of player versus character. I cannot wait to talk about this topic because there is just so much to say. Like, these people go on this show and it's not the same thing. Like, the thing is, when you are Tom Cruise and you go and read the script for Mission Impossible, you know that you're playing a character. You're playing like Ethan or whatever. And at the end of the day, that's it. It's over. Okay. It's not the same thing for reality television. These people go on there and they say that, oh, you know, I'm a veterinarian from whatever, or I'm a doctor, or as you said, I'm a lawyer or whatever. Okay. And so they go there. They play this very deceitful game where the whole point is to like lie to everyone. But the thing that people don't realize is they're not playing a character. They're just being edited as one. And then they got to go back to their real life. And we're going to explore sort of what happens if you're like a jerk on this show. How do you make that readjustment to your real life? How do you sort of go back? Like, how is your boss ever going to trust you again? Like, hey, Bill, you know, like, I want you to make sure that like you don't say anything about this. Well, I just saw you on TV lying through your face at every set, you know, and so it's going to that player versus character, and I think it's going to really, you know, I like to break ground in this genre, and I think that with the help of these panelists, we're going to do it one more time.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad that you're doing these as a series, that there'll be others. If people are listening to this episode, for example, they might have missed this one that you're doing on September 26th, but there will be others, right? Do you have anything else?
Yeah, they can go back and watch. Yeah, they can go back and watch the one that we did on racism. It's called Real Talk. So they can go back and watch the one on racism. They can go back and watch the important conversation we did on mental health. We're basically centralizing it all from the Bryce and Wen Present Instagram account. Like, that's just an easy way for us to all like collectively point at the same thing. So if you go to the Bryce and Wen Present Instagram account, you will find how you can get free tickets. It's all the panels are free. We don't charge for them because they're educational. They're all in different schools, like I said, at McMaster. So if you go to that Instagram account, you can get tickets to it. You can also find links to the previous panels. You can find out who's on it. So it's basically all on that account. One-stop shop. Just
give me that account one more time, Murtz. I didn't catch it.
It's Instagram.com. And I just want to see if there's an underscore. One sec. Bryce, and yeah, there it is. Yeah, no, there's no underscore. So it's just Instagram.com, Bryce, BRICEANDWEN present. So Instagram.com /Bryce and Wen present, and everything is there. Like, everything is there. All the events we're doing, all the real talks we're doing. We've actually, I can't say anything about it now, but we're already planning another one in a different city next month. So it's going, and we're going to be at a different school, another university.
That's fantastic.
So it's everything I wanted it to be when we conceived of the idea a few months ago. And I'm very glad that all of these educational institutions are picking up on this and realizing that this is not just a dumb man's entertainment anymore. There's a lot of life lessons we can take from this genre.
In fact, aren't I don't know if it's a moderator, but in the McMaster show, is there a professor who actually teaches about Survivor as part of the deal, right?
Yeah, he's actually, so we're going to be co-moderating it together. We actually did the last one in Toronto. His name is Hartley Jaffine, and he runs a course on Survivor and reality television at McMaster. And, you know, that might sound like a unique job to people. Ironically, it's not. Like, there was a guy named Max Dawson who was a Survivor professor, I think at the time in Chicago or something, who was doing the same thing as Hartley's doing here. And he actually got on the show. He was actually cast on Survivor 30. And so, you know, it's just, you know, like, it's one thing to get cast on the show, but the stuff that this show has done, you know, for all of the bad that people say, I mean, it's changed people's lives. You know, it led to Rob and Amber's marriage. It led to basically everything I've done in this field. You know, it's just changed a lot of lives. And I think that both positively and negatively, and that's an area that's going to continue to be explored. Like I said, how many lives is it saving right now? Like, in terms of, like, while the strike is on, it's basically filling so many content lineups in prime time. I was saying to somebody the other day, I can't remember a time when Survivor Big Brother, The Amazing Race, and The Challenge were all on at the same time. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Well, really, this is where it all began. It was 20 years ago, 22, there was strikes in television, not as maybe prolonged as this one, but it certainly, the networks back then were scrambling for content, and that helped fuel this interest.
Yeah, it was. It was like there was one season only where there were two seasons of Big Brother, I believe, and they did Big Brother 9, and that was the one that like happened at a different time because they had nothing else to fill, you know.
Yeah, but what do you think? This idea, I've heard Bethany Frankel has talked about this, and others that we're in desperate need of a guild to speak for the people who are involved in reality TV, because right now there's opportunity for abuse. They don't have a protection of a guild. Do you think that's a valid point?
It is such a difficult question. You know, like the one thing I will tell you is that I'm not surprised it's Bethany Frankel behind it. You know, like, it's like I'm trying to think of like the right. It's like if you hear an ambulance siren in Buffalo, you know, Celino and Barnes are going to be right behind that car. You know, is kind of what it's like. So when I found out that it was like Bethany Frankel, that didn't surprise me. But here's the thing. The one thing I want to bring up, this was actually what I was looking into just before we sort of started doing this, is I think this actually stemmed from a person named Jeremy Hartwell, who was a former cast member of Love is Blind. You know, and I think that, you know, I don't think he... You know, when you say Jeremy Hartwell and you say Bethany Frankel, obviously a lot of people are going to sort of, you know, but yeah, they're just going to automatically associate it with like, you know, Bethany Frankel, bigger name. You know, it's sort of like Bill Brio and Murtz Jaffer. You know, who are you going to believe? But the thing is, Jeremy Hartwell. Yes. So Jeremy Hartwell is basically the one who, along with somebody else named Nick Thompson, set up the Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network. And so that, I guess, is I've been looking into this, but it's apparently a charity that provides a charity. That's a funny word to use, but providing reality TV cast members with legal and mental health support. And I think that this all stemmed from like Love is Blind. Love is Blind is a show that's gotten a lot of flack for the way that it's sort of like dealt with its contestants in humane conditions. I've heard stipends only being like, I don't know, $250 a week or something. And so I don't know. If you're going to ask me, is there a need for a union for reality stars? I don't know. Like, maybe there might be a need for it, but at the same time, it's sort of like when there's a strike, you know, like wherever there's a strike, there's going to be a scab. And in reality television, you know, like if you do a union or something, like I just feel like there's always going to be somebody that's willing to get on that show for a lower amount of money, or you know what I mean? Like for a lower amount of money than you are. And I think that like in that sense, it's necessary, but at the same time, there's going to be scabs everywhere. Yeah.
Well, that's part of my thoughts on this. You know, you've got the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild have been out for months and months, and the networks, of course, pivot. Really, they lean into the reality because, well, there's our other option. So go ahead and strike writers and actors. Stay out as long as you want. We got 90 Minutes of Survivor, An Amazing Race. We got, other people coming up with any excuse. You know, actors who play games with their friends. That's a reality.
Yeah, they're
show
doing.
now.
What's that guy's name?
I can't even remember. David Spade is doing one.
I was just going to say that's the one I was thinking of. Snake Oil. I was just going to say that. That's what I was thinking of. You read my mind. Yeah, I was just going to say Snake Oil. So I mean, that's fine. It's something different, but I just think that the argument that wait a minute, if Bill Maher and Drew Barrymore get beat up because they wanted to come back and do their talk shows. Well, in terms of solidarity, shouldn't the people making Survivor and Amazing Race say, no, we're not going to go back either until the writers and the actors get their fair due? Why would they, though? Because that's two different genres, though. Like if I'm a reality TV producer, no, strike as long as you want. It's more shows, like if I'm a company like Kinetic, no, strike, no. So no, I don't think that they owe anything to anyone. I think that, I think it's two different sides of the coin. Like, what you've got me thinking about though, is if you were to strike, like which I don't think is ever going to happen. I just don't see it as an actual possibility. But if the reality stars or reality shows were to strike, the question is, when is the best time to do it? My thinking would be now. Because, now what would they do if they don't have reality TV when scripted is off, right? Like, the time would be now. I've heard people say that, they should do it, like, after the shows come back and then they can and I'm like, no, like, why would they ever consider reality shows when the scripted shows come back? Like, they would, that would actually be the death of reality television.
The best way to set this up would be that Jeff Probst, he's taking the votes out, and it's like yes or no to strike, to forming a guild. Like they could have on strike. They should have it happen live on an episode of Survivor.
Yeah. Well, but then they're gonna have to do it union styles where he passes out the ballots at like lunch when no one's looking.
All right, that's a big topic. We could go on and on about it, but I think it's fascinating in a way, and we'll see what happens. Looks like the guilds are talking again with the producers, and hopefully they'll get a breakthrough. More with Murtz after these messages. Well, you've loved her on Mary Makes It Easy. Now she's cooking up a whole new series called The Good Stuff with Mary Berg. What's it all about, Mary?
It's called The Good Stuff with Mary Berg, and when we were talking about it and kind of developing the idea and working through what it was actually going to look like, the main thing we kept coming back to is just filling people's lives up, and that doesn't mean with like always big flashy things, but just sharing stories from people doing good things from across Canada, sharing stories from people who are maybe more well-known who are doing good things. There will obviously still be food. Every day I'm gonna cook something up that you can make at home, have cook-alongs with different chefs, hopefully get some guests to cook along, because I want to convince people that anybody can actually cook. Wow. But I'm really excited to learn. I'm a lifelong trier, and I am so looking forward to learning from the different experts we're going to have on.
That's The Good Stuff with Mary Berg, weekdays at 10 a.m. on CTV. What's new this month on Super Channel? Well, for one thing, there's the new 6-episode Canada-Ireland original crime thriller, Clean Sweep. The series stars Charlene McKenna from Peaky Blinders and Barry Ward from Anne Boleyn. They play an Irish husband and wife. She's a supermom looking after 3 kids. He's a Galway detective. As he puts it, we make a good team. You're holding down the home front, me catching the bad guys. Trouble is, she hides a dark secret, and when a cold case is reopened, well, trouble strikes a little too close to home. Clean Sweep runs 1 episode a week, all month long on Super Channel Fuse, and can be streamed on demand each week following the broadcast. On the lighter side, Super Channel has new Season 10 episodes of When Calls the Heart running this month on Heart and Home. And remember, Super Channel, an all-Canadian service, is available via most cable providers across the country, as well as streaming live and on demand with Amazon Prime Video channels and Apple TV+. And we're back with Murtz Jaffer. Do you think there are lessons you have learned as someone who has studied Survivor and other reality shows that you apply to your work now as associate producer of the morning show?
Oh, well, they're going to be listening to this, so I'm going to.
No, but it's you want a guy who's cunning to run your show, right?
Well, no, you're definitely going to get a filtered answer here, but it's not just in my job as an producer. It's just I think that there's lessons to regardless of like what your job is, which is why I love the genre so much. And I think ultimately what these shows do is they really put a spotlight on teamwork and individual work. That's what I love about them so much, because you would not get through those first, I have a big problem with, there's a lot of problems I have with like the shows not being that long. Like, you're calling the show Survivor and it's only 26 days. This started out as 39 or whatever.
Right,
and I just feel The number of days is really, I really have a big problem with that. Like, you got to keep these shows going longer. And now with no, you can easily do that now, considering there's nothing else on TV. So I really have a problem with like how many days these show lasts now. But the point of it is, regardless, you're not going to make it through those first few days unless you have a team that you can rely on. One guy doing the fire, one guy, sort of building the shelter, one guy building the commode or whatever, right? You need that at the beginning of the game. But as you get closer to the money, as you get closer, you'll find that, like, well, I don't need him anymore. The shelter's already built. We've already got the commode, like I've learned how to make and it's that concept of it that I just find so interesting, that you basically learn and work together. But as you get closer to the money, you find out who you really are. You find out like what your values actually are. Do you care more about protecting the people that helped you at the beginning, or do you care more about yourself? And I think that that's a trait, and answering that question about what you value more is something that you can apply to every respect of your life. I
agree. When you think Richard Hatch, he really had to go out and spear fish because he was on day 36 of a starvation diet. Like there was actual survival tendencies there that really came into play because it was longer, right?
Yeah. And I mean, they're never going to let anyone starve. If this is a show, they're never going to let anyone starve. There will always be rice, or like Jeff will always offer some kind of deal where, like if you don't go to tribal or agree to go to tribal council, I'll give you more rice. So, like if this was a real Survivor show, then no, they would have no food, which is why there was, I wanted to bring this up. It was the last thing I forgot to look up before we did this interview, but there was a show that I just watched on Netflix. And it is the only time I have ever said that I've liked a reality show more than Survivor.
Wow.
This show, the point of this show, they basically they basically took this group of nomads, okay, people that have no social interaction with a lot of other people, okay, and they split them into like 4 teams and they dropped them off, I don't know, like in the Arctic or something. Now, get this. You will not believe the core concept of this show. It wasn't to vote each other out. All they had to do was survive. Okay, that's it. So the last person who could like make it is the one that won the money. Now they cast some of the most I think they legit, and I'm not even saying this to make you laugh. They cast criminals on this show. They cast people with like criminal records, okay? And so at a certain point, so then they're in this wilderness or whatever. And the whole point is all they have to do is survive. Now, this leads to them realizing that actually the people on their own team is actually competition for them, right? Like the more people that stay is bad for them. So this one woman realizes that, wait a minute, I don't have to stay out here in the wilderness that long as I can get other people to quit. And what she does to make other people quit, it is the absolute most depraved situation. Like they are freezing and like she goes to other people and she like takes their fire, takes their like tent, like basically is trying to freeze them to death so that they have no choice but to fire the signal gun and get out, because she realizes that the more bad things she can do to get them to quit, the faster she will have, the less amount of time she's going to have to stay there. And I'm telling you, Bill, I remember I started watching that show and I said, I'm just going to watch one episode of this new show at 1 a.m. I was up until 12 the next day because I just could not stop. And anyway, wow. The reason I'm bringing this up, though, is because I think that that's the escalation of like reality TV. That show really did a great job at casting and at showing how far people are willing to go. Like you used to think that like Richard Hatch was bad. Richard Hatch is like Mother Teresa compared to the people on this show, And I think that's the dangerous territory that we're entering in now. Is right. Like it's just going to get worse and worse. And that show took it to a level that I have never seen in 23 years. And if it gets any worse than that, I don't even know if I can keep watching, because that was pretty ridiculous.
Quickly,
yes.
Have you missed a minute of Survivor US?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I've actually when the show first started in 2000, I actually used to record them on VHS. In fact, I'm looking at all my VHS tapes now, and I wanted to pause out every single commercial. So because this was like before the DVD stuff, Yeah. So I have them all on like VHS. I've watched every season, I'd say. I mean, not the new ones, like not the ones like I'd say 30 and onwards. But before that, I think I've seen every episode at least 6 times. At
Wow.
least.
Who are the top 3 Survivor contestants, cast members to party with?
Oh, to party with. I thought you were going to say who are the best players. I had my answer all ready for the best 3 players. You threw me a curveball.
If you can narrow it down to 3.
God, best party with. I mean, I have to go with like Wendell and like I have to go with what's the freshest in my mind. Wendell and Bryce are just running so many events right now. Like they are running all the Survivor finale parties. They are like involved a little bit in the Big Brother stuff as well. So I would say probably them. They're sort of like, I don't know, they remind me so much of like when I got started here. And I just, there's times where like you think to yourself like, oh, the stuff I could have done, like back in the early 2000s, And so, yeah, I would say probably Wendell and Bryce. Obviously, I'm going to answer Boston Rob for every positive question, so he'd be my third.
All right, perfect. All right, how many purple hats do you own?
Only one.
What?
There's only one fedora. Now, ask me how many times I've gotten that hat rewired since I got it, or ask me, actually, not a lot of people know this story about how my whole like maroon burgundy like thing got started.
Okay.
So like what happened was I went, I believe it was, the Survivor 4 Marquesas finale, Boston Rob's first season. And I think it was at Wallman Rink or something in Central Park. And I remember when I got there, they don't do the live shows anymore. That's another subject for another day, which is really like heartbreaking to me. But when I went to Central Park and I gave my name at the door, the audience coordinator was like, oh, like, what are you, like press or something? And I go, yeah, press. She's like, yeah, up there. And then she screams like to another audience coordinator that's like literally like 500 level if we're talking about the Rogers Center last row. And he's like, yo, hey, Sal, we got another internet guy over here. And I remember I was just so horrified because, and I said to myself at that time, which was, I think it was in 2000, I said, there is no way they are ever going to call me an internet guy again. So I remember I went to a store when I got back to Toronto the next day after I flew back. And I said to the guy at the suit store, I go, look, I want you to give me the ugliest suit you have. I want you to give me the suit that nobody else, like, that's been sitting here like forever or whatever. And he's like, oh, I got just the one. He pulls out this like burgundy number. And the reason that I wanted it is because I knew that if I wore this suit and then eventually I got a matching hat with it, that I would always be remembered as the guy in burgundy, that I would never be remembered or called the internet guy again. And it totally worked. And I guess that was the first lesson that I learned in branding and characterization. But not a lot of people know that story as to like the origins of like why I wear that outfit. And so anyway, so I've had that hat like since that time. Like, it's incredible. I've had that hat for 20 years. I've had it rewired almost 5 times. I mean, a lot of people even say that you're not actually at a Survivor finale unless I'm there with that hat on,
Absolutely. Well, I've seen you in press situations on Zoom calls and live, and you're wearing that outfit, and the famous actors or actresses are going, "Oh, nice suit." Right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. Like, and I think that says something. Like, I remember because I said to the guy, give me the one that like nobody else wants. And like, I actually went to, God, it's so funny. I went to a concert last night at the Danforth Music Hall. And there was a security guard there. It was a friend of mine from LA. He's a singer named Bryce Fine. And the security guard comes up to me. And he's like, because I was waiting to meet Bryce after the concert was over. And so this security guard comes up to me and he's giving me this look. And he's like, yo, what are you doing here? And I thought he was going to kick me out for sort of hanging around. But I was hanging around to meet my friend. And then he turns to me and he goes, and let me ask you something else. And I go, okay, what? And he goes, we're not too good enough. We're not good enough for you to wear the purple suit tonight. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. This random security guard at like this brought up the, and so like, yeah, I guess my branding idea worked, huh?
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, let me down to 3 last questions here.
Yes.
I wanted to ask everybody, what are you watching right now? You've mentioned a few things, but is there something you're streaming or watching that you're really into right at this red hot moment?
I love the challenge. I've already advocated for it before. I think it's just a great show. I think Johnny Bananas is somebody that you need to watch. I don't think we have, I think he's going to retire from these shows soon, but if you've never seen what this guy has done, he's definitely one to watch. And then I recently got into Yellow Jackets, which, Yellow Jackets, I didn't like. I watched the pilot at first, and I had the same reaction as when I watched the Friday Night Lights pilot. I didn't like either pilot at all. Like, I just didn't know what was happening, but I gave it a second shot. And I'm obsessed with it. I think it's a fantastic show. And just like Friday Night Lights, which is my favorite scripted show, when I gave it a second chance, it ended up being the same thing. And I feel like that is also a parallel to me. I think if you don't like me at first, just give me a second shot.
Well, Yellow Jacket's pretty good cast, right? You get intrigued by them. Yeah.
It's a very interesting. I think that in an era of like reboots and stuff, where you could even argue that all of the new reality shows are just poor man's versions of, like Ninja Warrior or Survivor or any of these originators. It's very rare to get a unique concept. And I do like Yellow Jackets, although you could argue that it's just a new spin on like Lost. I know I've heard that argument before. But the best shows are the ones that I feel like offer something new. It's why Succession did as well as it did, There's actually some new shows coming out on E! If people don't know. I think there's one that's called The GOAT, which is going to, determine like the best reality star of all time. Right. I think there's another one coming out on E! That's called House of Villains. And they've brought back all the villains like Johnny Fairplay, Omarosa, Johnny Bananas, New York. And I think that these shows that are coming out, man, I can't wait to see what Canadian network picks these bad boys up, because I think that like House of Villains, like sign me up, like all day, every day. I'm just going to, I'm just going to dedicate my life to this show. I might have to find a new job or something. But like, I'm going to just dedicate my life to that show.
All right. We'll look forward to that. And what was your favorite show as a child, as a youngster? Was there a show that you used to race home from school?
100%. Today's Special, absolutely loved. Massive fan of Today's Special. Huge Today's Special fan. I love Transformers. I loved He-Man. I loved She-Ra. The thing is, I've loved television for a very long time, almost like since birth. Like I remember when we'd be eating dinner, one of the games my family used to play with me is they would just name any day, any time slot, and any channel, and I could tell you what was on. Wow. There's that little, part of my character.
You were your family's TV guide then.
100%, yeah. And so that, it was just a natural progression. I always knew I'd be working in television. Like, I just loved it so much. I still do. And I do. My final recommendation, I think, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I think, is Black Mirror. Black Mirror is just my favorite. Black Mirror, Black Mirror's worst episode is, I think, better than anything that has been on television in the last 15 years. And for anyone who hasn't seen that show, you are really missing out. Like, in my opinion, they shouldn't even have, and I guess they won't now because of the strike. They won't have the Emmy Awards or whatever, but they should just call them the Black Mirror Awards. That's how highly I think of that show.
All right. Well, there's a recommendation. Finally, Murtz, what is your all-time favorite TV theme song?
Okay, I was gonna go with Survivor just because I think that's what most people.
It's a pretty good one, yeah.
No, my favorite one, without question, is Melrose Place, and really? that's why I loved that Seinfeld episode where they basically refer to that theme song. That might be my favorite episode of TV ever, because Seinfeld was such a brilliant show because it just had its pulse on what people were thinking, and I never in a million years thought anyone else would get that same vibe from Melrose Place. And then Seinfeld had a whole gag dedicated to that theme song, and I was just like, wow. So yes, it's and actually, if you ask me what is I would say my favorite new school scripted show is Black Mirror, but for the majority of my life it's been Melrose Place. If you ask me what show have I seen the most episodes of, I've seen more Melrose Place than I've even seen Survivor. Melrose Place, every episode was like a series finale. I've never seen a show like that in my life. I was on the edge of my seat, waiting for Melrose Place.
It's funny, I hear more and more people now talking about they're going back and they're rewatching Dallas, and they're like, "Oh my god,
I love Dallas too."
Yeah, this show's amazing. I can't believe it still holds up.
I love Dallas. I love Dynasty. I love Melrose. Yeah. I love 90210. These are some classics. Breaking Bad is like that too, though. You could never. It's like Shawshank Redemption for TV, where if you're scrolling the channels and Breaking Bad is on, doesn't matter what season, what episode you stop.
And that sounds like a good place for us to stop. I want to thank Murtz again. And the name of that show we were struggling to remember is called Outlast. It's on Netflix. Jason Bateman is among the executive producers, and it's about 16 survivalists who compete for a chance to win a cash prize in the Alaskan wilderness. Check it out, Outlast. It's Murtz approved. Well, I have to admit that Murtz threw me a complete curveball by choosing as his favorite all-time TV theme song, the theme to Melrose Place. I just did not see that coming. This anthem to the 90s was composed by Tim Truman. The good news is that if you've heard a few seconds of it, you've heard it. It's no Survivor anthem, that's for sure, and yes, the tribe has spoken. Thanks as always to producer Phil Hong for capturing this episode's Immunity Idol. My thanks as well to the many publicists who bring great guests to this show each week. Big thanks to our sponsors, Hollywood Suite, Paramount Plus, CTV, and Super Channel. I'm forever grateful to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, and all the Crispy Critters for recording the music used on this podcast. It was all done long ago for an award-winning short I made with Pat Bullock called Varsity Blues. Finally, thanks to you, listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please favor us with a like or a comment at the home site, brio.tv. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.